Why do you always watch me drink?
Because I care about you. You just need rest, Nala. Trust me.
I looked down at the cup of red hibiscus tea in my hand. The steam rose gently, carrying a familiar scent, the kind I had mistaken for care and love for weeks, until I realized that every time I drank it, I couldn't remember what happened afterward.
What is this? What are you doing to me?
What I didn't know was,
not me.
Kofi wasn't acting alone. And what they had planned for me was far more than just a long sleep. If you're watching this story, tell me, what city are you listening from? I truly want to read every comment. I wish you and your family health and peace. And stay until the end, because some truths will change the way you see marriage forever. I still remember clearly the first morning I began to doubt myself. Not Kofi, but my own memory. That day, I opened my tailoring shop early as usual. Sunlight filtered through the colorful Ankara curtains, scattering across the floor like fragments of broken memories. A young bride walked in, smiling as she asked, "Nala, is my dress ready yet?" I looked at her, and my mind went completely blank. I couldn't remember taking her order. I couldn't remember measuring her. I couldn't remember anything. I forced a smile and asked her to come back in the afternoon. But the moment she stepped out, my hands started trembling. I flipped open my order book. Her name was there, my handwriting, a clear due date. There was no denying it. And it wasn't the first time. I started arriving at the shop later. Some days, I woke up close to noon, my head pounding like a hot nail had been driven into my temple. Kofi was always there, standing in the kitchen with his back to me, as if he had been waiting for hours. "You slept so deeply again," he said softly. "I'm really worried about you." I believed him. I truly did. After my mother passed, I thought maybe I was just exhausted. A woman in the neighborhood even told me, when a woman loses someone, her spirit becomes fragile. You need to lean on your husband. And I did, more than I realized. But then, small things started disappearing. A silver bracelet my mother left me. A pair of earrings I only wore on special occasions. At first, I blamed myself for being careless. But when my second wedding ring, the one I kept in a wooden box, also vanished, a cold feeling crept in. That night, when Kofi handed me my tea, I asked, "Have you seen my ring?" He didn't look at me right away. He just stirred his cup slowly. "You forgot again?" he sighed. "You've been so forgetful lately, Nala. I think you should see a doctor." The way he said it wasn't concern. It sounded like a conclusion he had already made. That night, I couldn't fall asleep. I lay with my back to him, listening to Kofi's steady breathing behind me, and for the first time, I felt afraid in my own home. The next morning, I did something I had never imagined doing before. I bought a small notebook, and I started writing. I wrote down when I went to sleep, when I woke up, everything I did during the day, every order, every customer, every tiny detail, as if I was trying to hold on to myself through each line of ink. At first, it felt unnecessary, but after just 3 days, I realized something that took the air out of my lungs. What I wrote and what I remembered didn't match. There were conversations I had documented in detail, but in my mind, they had never happened. There were things I was certain I hadn't done yet. My own handwriting told a completely different story. I sat there in my shop, staring at that notebook, and for the first time, I couldn't trust my own mind anymore. And that's when a thought began to creep in slowly. But clearly, what if the problem isn't me? That night, when Kofi brought me tea again, I didn't drink it right away. I held the cup, staring into the deep red liquid, and suddenly realized every time I lost my memory, it started after I drank it. I looked up at him. He was still smiling, gentle, patient, perfect in a way that felt terrifying. And for the first time, I didn't see my husband anymore. I saw someone waiting for me to disappear. If you were me in that moment, would you keep believing or would you start questioning? Comment trust if you would trust your intuition. That night, I didn't drink the tea. I lifted the cup to my lips like I always did, just enough for the steam to touch my face, then set it down when Kofi turned away to grab his phone. My heart was beating so fast I was afraid he could hear it. I didn't know what I was looking for, proof, or just a reason to believe this was all a misunderstanding, but something inside me wouldn't let me pretend anymore. The next morning, when Kofi left earlier than usual, I stood by the door, gripping his car keys tightly. I had never gone through my husband's belongings before. In our culture, that was almost an insult. But there are lines, and once they are crossed, you don't have the luxury of standing still. I opened the trunk. At first, nothing seemed strange. A few rolls of fabric, a toolbox, an old pair of sneakers. But when I leaned in deeper, my hand brushed against the lining underneath, and I felt something hard, out of place, like something had been hidden there on purpose. I used my fingernail to pull at the seam, just a little, and then it tore open. A small glass vial dropped into my hand. The liquid inside was a deep, thick blue. No label, no markings, just something that didn't belong in a normal home. I stood there for a long time. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. There was only silence, so deep I could hear every beat of my heart. I didn't go to the shop that day. Instead, I took the vial to a small clinic 3 blocks away where an old friend of my mother used to work. I didn't explain much. I just said I needed it tested. 48 hours. The longest 48 hours of my life. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. Every night, I still held the tea, still acted like nothing had changed. That's when I realized. Sometimes the most dangerous part isn't the truth itself, but how you have to live once you know it. When the results came back, the woman at the clinic looked at me in a way I couldn't quite place. Not pity, not surprise. Caution. This is a strong sedative, she said slowly, used in severe psychiatric treatment. In small doses, it causes deep sleep and temporary memory loss. But over time, she paused, it can lead to permanent cognitive decline. I didn't ask anything else. I didn't need to. On the way home, I couldn't remember how many streets I had walked through. Everything blurred not because of the drug, but because the truth was too clear. Kofi wasn't just helping me sleep. He was erasing me, piece by piece. That night, when he handed me the tea like always, I looked at him a little longer. Kofi smiled warm, patient, perfect. You should drink it early, he said, so you can rest. I nodded. The cup was in my hand, but this time my mind was completely clear. I started connecting the pieces. The land my mother left me its value rising quickly over the past 2 years. The documents Kofi had been asking me to sign. The way he kept saying, let me handle things for you so you won't be stressed. None of it was random anymore. It was a plan, and I was the target. I wasn't afraid. What chilled me was how calm I felt. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I didn't run. I simply set the cup down. And in that moment, a thought formed sharp, clear, like a blade. If he thinks I'm getting weaker, then I'll let him believe it. But this time, I will be the one controlling the story. If you discovered the person closest to you was slowly destroying you, would you leave immediately or stay and uncover the whole truth? Comment stay or leave. I truly want to know what you would choose. The first night I switched the cups, my hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid of being caught, but because I knew that from that moment on, I was no longer the wife who trusted her husband. I was stepping into a game where one wrong move could cost me everything. Kofi stood in the kitchen with his back to me, just like always. He stirred the hibiscus tea gently, The soft clink of the spoon against the cup steady and familiar, almost too familiar. I stood behind him, staring at his back, wondering, when did this man become a stranger? "What are you doing in here?" he asked, without turning around. I forgot my towel," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. He chuckled softly. "You've been so forgetful lately." That sentence used to make me feel small, but this time, it made me sharper. When he turned and handed me the cup, I took it with both hands, like I always did. Then I coughed lightly, bending forward just a little. Just 1 second. A small movement so subtle no one would notice. But in that 1 second, the cups were switched. I straightened up, bringing my cup to my lips, but I didn't drink. Kofi watched me, his expression calm, no suspicion. "Drink it," he said. I nodded. But instead of drinking, I only let the cup touch my lips, then set it down. And he lifted the cup and took a long sip. I didn't take my eyes off him. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Kofi's speech started to slow. His words became uneven. He rubbed his eyes like a man exhausted after a long day. "I feel sleepy," he muttered. "You should rest," I said softly as if I cared. He nodded, walking unsteadily just like I used to. But this time, I knew why. When he collapsed onto the sofa and fell into a deep sleep, I stood there for a long time. I didn't feel victory. I only felt a cold, undeniable truth. If I hadn't discovered it sooner, the one lying there could have been me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the table, opened my notebook, and added a new line. Night 1. I didn't drink. In the days that followed, I continued. It wasn't always easy. Some nights, Kofi watched me longer than usual. Sometimes he stood a little too close, as if observing. But I learned to keep everything natural. A sneeze, a brush of the hand, a smile. Small actions, enough to switch the cups without leaving a trace. 3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks. Kofi began to change. He forgot his car keys, missed appointments. Once, he asked me the same question 3 times in one morning. "Have you seen my phone?" While it was right there, in his hand. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw confusion in his eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I think I'm just tired." I nodded. That same line he had once said to me, and now it had come back to him. But I didn't stop, because I knew this was not the moment for sympathy. If I stopped, he wouldn't. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the workshop, I noticed something strange. The security camera I installed last year had been shifted. Not much, just slightly, but enough to avoid a certain part of the room where I usually worked. I stood there, staring at it. A cold feeling ran down my spine. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw it. A tiny glint reflecting the light not from my old camera, but from another one, hidden carefully, right inside my space. I didn't touch it. I didn't remove it. I just stood there, looking, and realizing something that made my chest tighten. Kofi didn't just want me to lose my mind. He wanted to prove that I had lost it, and someone else was watching every step I took with him. That night, when he handed me the tea like always, I smiled. I still switched the cups. But this time, there were no more questions in my mind. Only a decision. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was stepping into a war that I had to win. If you discovered you were being watched, would you expose it immediately or stay silent to uncover the full truth? Comment fight if you wouldn't stop here. I didn't take the camera down. I stood in front of it for almost a full minute. Long enough for whoever was watching on the other side to believe I was just confused, trying to understand what was happening. Then I turned away slowly, like a tired woman with a foggy mind, exactly the image they wanted to see. But inside, I was more awake than ever. That night, I didn't write in my notebook right away. I sat on the bed, flipping through the pages I had filled over the past weeks. The shaky handwriting at the beginning, gradually becoming steadier, clearer. And for the first time, I realized I was never losing control. I was being controlled. The next morning, I did something different. I performed. I dropped my scissors in the middle of cutting fabric. I asked my staff the same question twice. I stood frozen in front of a customer as if I had forgotten what I was saying. And, most importantly, I let the camera see everything. That afternoon, Kofi came to the workshop earlier than usual. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern, but his eyes weren't concerned. They looked like someone checking if his plan was unfolding exactly as expected. I don't remember what day it is," I said softly, lowering my head. He stepped closer and placed his hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." That sentence sounded like a promise, but I knew it was a declaration. That night, when he fell asleep, I went back to the workshop. I didn't turn on the lights. I used only the glow from my phone, scanning every corner carefully, and this time, I looked deeper. There wasn't just one camera. There were two. One pointed directly at my work table. The other aimed at the entrance. Not to steal, but to watch. Me. I stood there in the dark room, and for the first time, I didn't feel hunted anymore. I started to see the pattern, the network, and Kofi couldn't have done this alone. 2 days later, the answer came, in a way I never expected. Amina came to visit. She's my cousin, a few years older than me, the one who helped me build my shop from the ground up, the one who once stayed up all night with me to finish my first wedding dress, the one I trusted, almost as much as I trusted myself. She walked into the workshop carrying a container of food. "I heard you haven't been feeling well," she said, her voice soft, familiar. I smiled. "I'm okay." We sat down. She glanced around the shop, her eyes sweeping across the corners, just a little too quickly. If I hadn't been paying attention, I might have missed it. "You should rest more," she said. "Kofi is really worried about you." I looked at her, just for a second, but it was enough for me to realize she wasn't asking. She already knew. "He told you?" I asked slowly. Amina nodded. "He just wants what's best for you. You know, when women get too stressed, they can lose control." "Lose control?" She didn't answer right away. She just placed her hand over mine. "If someone helped you manage your work, your paperwork, you wouldn't feel so overwhelmed. Sometimes we have to accept that we can't handle everything." I pulled my hand away. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but enough. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't a conversation. This was a step in their plan. That night, I didn't need any more proof. I had everything. Kofi, Amina, and someone else behind those cameras. A system, a trap. Not to kill me immediately, but to make the whole world believe I had lost myself. I lay in bed, my back turned to Kofi, listening to his steady breathing behind me, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry, not because they wanted my property, but because they believed I didn't deserve respect. They thought I was easy to erase. They thought I would stay silent. They were wrong. I closed my eyes, and in the darkness, I made a decision I knew would change everything. I wasn't just going to escape this trap. I was going to make them walk right into it. If you discovered that the person you trust most was part of the betrayal, would you face it or walk away? Comment "face it" if you refuse to run from the truth. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because I knew my time was running out. When you realize you're trapped in something this carefully planned, you understand one thing: the people who built it won't wait for you to wake up and escape. They will act when you're at your weakest. And I knew. They believed I was already there. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Daniel. We used to be classmates. Now he's a lawyer who handles property disputes in Nairobi. I didn't tell him everything. I only said one sentence. "I think Someone is trying to prove that I'm no longer mentally capable of managing my own assets. There was silence on the line for a few seconds. Then he asked, "Do you have proof?" I looked at my notebook, at the cameras in my workshop, at the cup of tea every night. "Not yet," I said, "but I will." Daniel didn't ask anything else. He just said, "Don't sign anything, and if you can, record everything." That was the moment I understood I couldn't just defend myself anymore. I had to start gathering. In the days that followed, I lived like two different people. During the day, I was Nala falling apart. I forgot orders. I repeated myself. I let customers see me as unstable. I let the cameras capture everything. At night, I became someone else entirely. I checked Kofi's phone while he slept. Not every night opportunities were rare, but enough. Message. Short, fragmented conversations. But when I pieced them together, they formed a complete picture. How is she doing? Getting worse. She barely remembers anything now. Good. The doctor will arrange the evaluation next week. Hurry. I don't want to wait any longer. I read each line, my hands turning cold. They weren't just planning. They were almost done. But what took my breath away was another message. Are the assets under her name ready? Almost. Once we get the confirmation, everything will be transferred to us. Use. Use. Not me. Not just Kofi. Use. Use. I knew exactly who the missing name was. Amina. 2 days later, everything became even clearer, in a way I never wanted. I was in the workshop when the power went out. Not the whole street. Just my shop. I stood there in the darkness, my heart pounding. Then I noticed something faint, but unmistakable. The smell of burning. Not a full fire, but the smell of electrical wires overheating. I rushed to the back, where the control panel was. A small spark flickered, then died. If I had been a few minutes later, it wouldn't have been a small spark anymore. I stood there, staring at the tampered wiring, and I understood. They didn't just want to prove I was unstable. They were preparing an accident. A fire in my workshop. A mentally unstable woman. Causing it. Everything would make perfect sense. I stepped back slowly. There was no doubt anymore. No hope that this was a misunderstanding. This was the real plan. That night, when Kofi came home, I acted the same as always. I smiled. I spoke slowly. I held the cup of tea and switched it. He drank. I watched him. But this time, there were no more questions, no more fear. Only a cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was preparing to end this game. I took my phone, turned on the recorder, and placed it in its usual spot where the hidden camera couldn't see it. Because I knew, very soon, they would say everything themselves. If you knew you had only one chance to turn everything around, how far would you go? Comment all in if you wouldn't look back. That night, I decided to end everything. Not by running away, but by making them believe they had already won. I sat at the dining table, a stack of papers in front of me, documents Kofi had just placed there. Under the warm yellow light, the pages were filled with dense legal language transfer of asset control, power of attorney, medical declarations. Everything had been prepared so carefully, too carefully for a husband who just wanted to help. You just need to sign, Kofi said, his voice soft, familiar. I'll take care of the rest. I didn't answer right away. I let my hand tremble slightly, not out of fear, but because I knew the camera was watching. I flipped through the pages slowly, as if trying to read but not understanding. I'm not sure, I whispered. Kofi sighed and stepped closer. Nala, you're not well. You know that. You forget everything now. I just want to protect you. Protect. I almost laughed, but I held it in. Just sign it, another voice said. Amina. She stood by the doorway, leaning casually, her eyes calm, too calm. No longer the cousin who once stayed up all night helping me sew my first wedding dress. no longer the person I trusted. Just another piece of the plan. The sooner, the better, she added. The doctor is waiting. I looked up. The doctor? And right then, a man walked in. White shirt, thin glasses, a small leather bag in his hand. He didn't need to introduce himself. I already knew who he was. The man who would declare me mentally unfit. The one who would sign the paper that would strip me of control over my own life. I looked at all three of them. Then I lowered my gaze, picked up the pen. Kofi held his breath. Amina didn't take her eyes off me. The doctor stood still, as if this were just another routine procedure. I signed. One name, then another, my hands still trembling. My head bowed low. A woman losing control, handing everything away. It's done, Kofi said, his voice lighter now, almost relieved. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Good. Now you should rest. I nodded, but I didn't move. I lifted my head and looked straight at him. For the first time in weeks, my eyes were no longer clouded. Kofi froze, just for a second, but it was enough. Do you want to hear what you just said? I asked, my voice so calm it surprised even me. Amina frowned. What are you talking about? I didn't answer her. I reached under the table and pressed a button. A soft click. Then their own voices filled the room, line by line, clear, undeniable. Once we get the confirmation, everything will be transferred to us. She barely remembers anything now. She just needs to sign. Kofi stepped back. What are you doing? His voice cracked. I stood up, slowly. I'm just letting you hear the truth, I said. The door behind them swung open. Two men walked in, Daniel and a plainclothes officer. No shouting, no chaos, just perfect timing. We've heard enough, the officer said firmly. Amina turned to Kofi. You said she didn't know anything. Kofi didn't answer. He just stared at me, as if, for the first time, he was seeing who I really was. Not a weak wife, not a woman losing her mind, but someone who had seen everything and waited for the exact moment to end it. I'm not weak, I said quietly, but clearly. I was just silent, long enough. They didn't resist. There was no point. Everything had been recorded. Clear, undeniable. When they were taken away, the house fell into an unfamiliar silence. I stood there, alone, surrounded by what used to be called family. And for the first time, I didn't feel empty. I felt free. Not because I had won, but because I hadn't lost myself. The door closed behind them. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to close a chapter of my life. I stood still for a long moment, my hands still trembling. Not from fear anymore, but because everything had happened so fast. 3 months of suspicion, 3 months of pretending, 3 months of holding myself together, and in the end, it was over in minutes. Daniel stepped closer. Are you okay? I nodded. But it took a few seconds to truly feel it. I'm okay, I said. And this time, I meant it. 2 weeks later, my workshop reopened. No smell of burning, no tampered wires, no hidden cameras, just sunlight, the hum of sewing machines, and vibrant fabrics filling the space again. But something had changed. Me. I was no longer the woman who tried to please everyone. No longer the one who stayed silent to keep the peace. No longer the one who placed her trust in others and forgot herself. One morning, a young woman walked into the shop. She looked around, then asked softly, Are you Nala? I smiled. Yes, she hesitated. I heard your story. From the neighbors. I just wanted to say thank you. For what? For not staying silent. I looked at her, and in that moment, I understood something I had never fully realized before. Winning isn't about making others pay. Winning is not letting what they did turn you into someone you're not. The assets? I kept my workshop. I kept my mother's land, but part of it. I used to open a free training space for women in my neighborhood, women who once believed they had no choice but to endure. Because I had been there, and I know, no one deserves to live a life where they are treated as if they have no value. One afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. Just one line. I was wrong. No name, but I knew who it was. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then deleted it. No reply. No anger. No need. Because some stories don't need words to end. You just have to keep walking. That night, I made myself a cup of tea. No one standing behind me. No eyes watching. No fear. I sat down, took a small sip, and for the first time in a long time, I could actually taste it. Warm. Real. Peaceful. Some women don't become strong when they win. They become strong the moment they realize they don't have to lose themselves to keep someone else. If you're listening to this story, and you've ever felt dismissed, manipulated, or made to believe you weren't enough, remember this: you are not weak. You were simply in a place that couldn't see your worth. If you believe a woman should stand up for herself, comment rise. And tell me, what city are you listening from? I wish you health, peace, and the strength to always choose yourself. There are some women who don't realize they are slowly disappearing until one day they look in the mirror and no longer recognize themselves. Not because they are weak, but because they loved too much, trusted too much, and accepted things they should have never accepted. Nala was once like that. She didn't lose in her marriage. She simply learned a lesson about trust and respect that cost her more than she ever imagined. Life doesn't always send us good people. Some people enter your life not to love you, but to test your limits, to teach you how to stand when no one else stands with you. And the most important thing is not how deeply you were hurt, but who you choose to become after all of it. Nala could have turned bitter. She could have taken revenge. She could have closed her heart forever. But she didn't choose that. She chose to keep her kindness not for others, but for herself. Because she understood, losing faith in humanity is far more dangerous than being betrayed. There is a truth many women spend a lifetime learning. Love should never make you shrink. If you have to stay silent to keep a relationship, then that is not where you belong. If you have to doubt yourself just to believe someone else, then that is not love. True strength is not about how much you can endure. It's about knowing when to stop, knowing when to say enough when your limits are crossed, and knowing how to walk away, not because you are weak, but because you finally understand your worth. If you are listening to this story, remember this: you don't have to be perfect to be loved. You only need to be brave enough not to lose yourself. And sometimes, the strongest decision a woman can make is not to stay, but to walk away, with her head held high and her heart still whole. If this story touched you, comment rise and tell me, what city are you listening from? I'd truly love to hear your voice. Stay strong, stay safe, and never forget your worth.